This lesson is meant to be a basic introduction on how to read sheet music on the guitar. We hope that you'll walk away from the lesson with a basic understanding of what to call the notes that you see on the page, how to find those on the guitar neck, and then how to start interpreting the rhythmic information that we get from the music. At the end of the lesson, we'll have some fun and use sheet music notation to learn the melodies from a couple of popular country songs. You'll need the sheet music that we created as an aid for this lesson, which you can get for free at sixstringcountry.com. The first thing we'll do is talk about notes, what to call them, and then how to find them on the guitar neck. So the first thing you need to do is pull up the sheet music that's beneath the video player at sixstringcountry.com. It's free. If you're watching this somewhere else, you can download it. And it's the first very top thing on the sheet music section. You see a collection of notes there. In the upper left-hand corner, you see what looks like a G. That's a treble clef. As guitar players, we read sheet music notation in the treble clef. Other instruments, like a piano, for example, needs to know how to read music in the treble and the bass clef, but lucky for us as guitarists, we basically only need to worry about knowing how to play the music in the treble clef. So, the 4/4 time signature that's right next to it, that's going to be talked about coming up here when we start talking about rhythms. But for now, let's look at that first note. The note is the black dot that's above the C letter. There's a black dot, that's the note. Then the line going straight up is called a stem. And we're not going to talk about rhythms at all in this tutorial. That's going to be the next tutorial. So for right now, you can just see that we've got that C note there, and then the letters that are beneath those notes represent what we're going to call each one. So the 5 lines that all those notes are sitting on, that's called a staff. The way we know what a note is called is where the note is sitting in relationship to those 5 lines, or to that staff. So for example, look at that first G. In the first measure there, you see the G, and then you go straight above the G on that sheet music, and it's sitting right on top of that second line of that staff, right? Whenever we see a note that's got the second line of the staff going through it, we know that that is a G note. And if we want to relate that back to the guitar, we just need to find a G note, but not any G note. It's got to be in the right octave. So I'm going to tell you that that G note is this open G string. So if you saw that note and you wanted to play it on the guitar, you would play this open G string. And the thing about reading sheet music is that it's a specific octave. So even though that's a G note, and that's a G note, and that's a G note, this would be incorrect, and this would be incorrect. Because we know from the sheet music, it's telling us that we need to play in this octave, that open G string. All right, now let's go back and look at the first note. Above the C, we've got one line down beneath the staff. It's got a little bit of a line going through it. You see that? That's called a ledger line. Ledger lines can go down or up above the staff as many times as whoever's writing the music wants. But typically, you'll only see 5 or 6 ledger lines beneath a staff because it gets really hard to read after that. In this tutorial, we're only going to be talking about that one ledger line beneath the staff right there. And that is a C note. So anytime you see one ledger line beneath the staff with a note on top of it, so the ledger line is going through it, that's a C note. Now, hopefully you know this already, but this is the 3rd fret of the A string. That's a C note. It's the base of a C chord, right? So that makes sense. This is a C note. If you need help learning what the frets are called in terms of their note names, we have a whole separate tutorial for that on 6-String Country called Strings and Note Names. That's also why we included the tabs on the sheet music. The whole point of this is that we're going to get away from looking at tabs, but it's a good, as we're starting out, it's a good thing for us to be able to check our work. So you can see there on the tab, 3rd fret of the A string, that equals the C note, right? Next up, we have the D note. So anytime you see a black dot, a note that's right beneath the bottom line of the staff, that's always going to be a D note. And on the guitar, we play that here, the open D string. So you can kind of see where this is going, right? Next up, if we see a note that's got the bottom line of the staff going through it, we know that is an E. It's always going to be an E, and we're always going to play that in this octave. So we can play the 2nd fret of D. Next up, we have the first space So it's between the bottom staff line and the second staff line. There's a space, and if the note is in that space, we know that that's going to be an F note, which we can play here on the 3rd fret of the D string. We've already talked about the G, which we're going to play open. That's when it's on the second staff line with the staff line going through it. Next we have an A, which is the space between the 2nd and 3rd staff line. We're going to play that on the 2nd fret of G. Then we've got a B, which is in that middle staff line, the 3rd staff line, with the staff line going through it. That's a B note, which we'll play as an open B string. And then we've got the 1 octave above this first C is this next C, and that's the 1st fret of the B string. As you may have noticed, what we just played is a C scale. It's a diatonic scale, and if you know your scales, you'll know that this is position 3 diatonic. This whole introduction to reading sheet music is going to take place on those notes. Of course, there's sheet music that goes further down, there's sheet music that goes further up, all the way to the top note on your guitar. But for this tutorial, we're just going to be talking about the notes that we just learned. And it ends up just becoming a memorized thing. If you spend enough time going over these notes, you'll just know that, oh, okay, I see a 2nd staff line going through that note, that's an open G. One way to kind of get it in your head is looking at the sheet music as you're playing it, starting on the C, and just say it as you do it. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. And just be sure you're looking at the sheet music and not the tabs. Just do that exercise as many times as it takes for you to get really comfortable with recognizing where those notes are. Next up, we're going to talk about rhythms. We have to know how long to hold the notes when we see one on the page and when to let them off. So look at that 2nd staff line on the sheet music aid that we have for this lesson, which again, you can download for free or look at right beneath the video player at sixstringcountry.com, and you'll see rhythm notes. These are all going to be on a C note, which, as we just learned, we see that it's 1 ledger line beneath the staff, so that's always going to be this note right here. We can see up at the top of the sheet music that this song is in 4/4 time. Time signatures can get kind of complicated. The only thing we need to know right now is 4/4 time is a very popular time signature. I would say the majority of popular music is written in 4/4 time, and all that means is we have 4 beats per measure. So oftentimes you'll hear someone starting out a song or getting the band all to start at the same time by saying 1, 2, 3, 4. That's just because there's 4 beats per measure, and it's kind of setting the tempo. So if we see a whole note, which is the first measure there on the rhythm notes, it doesn't have a stem, and it looks different, right? We know when we see that, we just need to play 1 note for the whole measure. So if the tempo is 1, 2, 3, 4, and we see a whole note, and it's that whole note, we're going to know that we need to play a C note, and we're going to hold it for 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then off. A half note is just kind of what it sounds like, right? It's going to fill up half the measure. So if there's 4 beats in a measure, we're going to hold the half note for 2 beats per half note. So in that second measure there, we have 2 half notes. They each get 2 beats. So we're going to see the half note. If we count off 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So in 4/4 time, which is what we're in, if we see a half note, you count for 2 beats for that half note. Okay, quarter notes, same principle. If we're in 4/4 time, a quarter note gets 1 beat. So if we were to play that measure, it's on the same note, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Eighth notes, as you're probably getting the picture here, in 4/4 time, you're going to have 8 eighth notes in one measure. So this is where, if you're a member of 6 String Country, oftentimes I'll be counting something as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. All we're doing is we're subdividing those beats. So instead of just 1, 2, 3, 4, which is what we play for quarter notes, we're going to strike the note on every time we say anything when we're counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So let's try that. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So that's an eighth note, and we just played it 8 times in one measure, and we can subdivide that and keep track of that in our head by counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And those are all the different notes that we're going to talk about in this tutorial. They go down a lot further than that. You got 16th notes, 32nd notes, 64th notes. We're not going to worry about any of that right now. For now, what I'd like to do is just play back what we just learned, that whole line of music there. So we're going to start with the whole note. 1, 2, 3, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The next thing we're going to talk about in this tutorial are rests. A rest is just what it sounds like. When you see a rest, it's telling you to not play anything. It means we're not doing anything. But it's important because when we're counting and trying to figure out when we're supposed to come in and when we're not supposed to come in, we need to know what they mean. And the whole notes and the whole rests are the same. So if you see that little upside down hat that you can see in that whole rest measure, that means you don't play anything for 4 beats if we're in 4/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't play anything. A half rest, just like the half notes in 4/4 time, means you're going to not play anything for 2 beats. 1, 2, 1, 2. A quarter rest, if you see that, for every one that you see, you don't play anything for 1 beat. So there's 4 beats in a measure, right? So we see that there's 4 of those, so we're not going to play anything that measure. Same thing with eighth rests. We don't play anything for 1/8 of the measure or half of a quarter rest. So don't get hung up on the rest thing. They make way more sense when we talk about it in context, which we're going to do coming up right now. All right, so we're going to try learning a really easy song using sheet music notation. So this happens to be one of my very favorite songs, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. I'm kidding, of course, but the point of learning something that's really familiar is that you're kind of self-policing yourself because you know what the melody is supposed to sound like. So if you play something wrong, you're kind of busting yourself in your own head just naturally, which is what we're going for here. So all these notes are notes that we already talked about in that key of C scale. So let's look at the first syllable there, twin. We've got 1 ledger line beneath the staff, which if we look up there we know is a C note. That's going to be there. We can also tell from the rhythm notes that that's a quarter note. So if we're in 4/4 time, which we are, that gets 1 beat. And you can see right after that we've got another one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, twinkle. All right, for that third beat, we can see that the note is on top of the second staff line with the note going through it. So if we go back up and we look at our chart here at the top of this sheet music notation, we can see that that's a G note. And like we already talked about, we're going to use that open string. And you can see that we have 2 of those in a row. So every note in this first measure is quarter notes, so we get 1 beat per note. So if we're going to play that first measure, twinkle, twinkle. And then we're going to go up and we're going to play whatever note we're supposed to play when we see a note in the second space of the staff line. If we look up at our chart, we know that that's an A note, which is right there. And we've got 2 quarter notes again. And the next note, we've got a note on top of the second staff line. So if we look at that, we know it's a G. We've already played one of those. And that note looks different, right? So if we look up at our rhythm notes, we can see that that's a half note, which we know gets 2 beats. So let's play the first 2 measures. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, 2. Let's count that out. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, continuing on above the word how, we know that if it's in that space between the bottom line and the second line of the staff, that's an F note. So like we talked about, we're going to play that F note here. and it's a quarter note, so it gets one beat, as does the next one. So how, I, and then if we've got the bottom staff line going through the note, we know that's an E. One, der, and then the space beneath the bottom staff line is a D, which we know is open D string. Where, you, and then we've got a half note on R, and we know that that's a C note, R. Okay, let's play that those first four measures right now. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, now you're fully equipped to figure out where the rest of these notes are, so I'm not even going to talk you through it, but what I will do is I'll play through it in tempo, I'll count it out the whole way, and we'll go nice and slow. Here's the whole Twinkle Twinkle Little Star melody. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, we're going to play the melody for Where the Green Grass Grows by reading the sheet music notation. The tabs are on there so you can check your work, but don't look at the tabs until you try reading the sheet music. Even though I know you can do it at this point, we're just going to go through the first couple of measures note by note and talk about how we figure it out, just as a review. So the first one, over I, we've got a note on top of that very lowest line of the staff, right, which we know if we look back at the chart is an E note, which you've already determined will play here on the 2nd fret of D. And then that's a quarter note, which we know because it looks like a quarter note in the rhythm notes. Over wanna, we've got a note that's sitting on top of the 2nd line of the staff, which we know is a G note. And then we've got back to that E note, but those are 8th notes. So we're going to have to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and for this one. Those first 2 beats would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and. Continuing on, we're back on that G, and that's a quarter note. So 3 and then where the is a G and an E, and those are 8th notes, right? So where the, and then we've got 2 G notes that are quarter notes in a row. So 1 and 2 and then we've got a half note on the 2nd space, so the space between the 2nd line and the 3rd line of that staff, which we know is an A note, which we play there. So the first 2 measures are 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. In the very last measure, you're going to see a little black line that connects a quarter note and a half note. That's called a tie. And when you see a tie, it means you don't restrike the note, you just hold it out. So for example, at the end for you, it would be you, and then we just hold that. We don't restrike it when we get to that half note. It just ties the notes together. All right, so take your time, go through all 8 measures of Where the Green Grass Grows that we've got written out here in sheet music form. And if you want to, go in with a pencil and write down the note names beneath the notes and just really get it in your head. And then when you're ready, I'm going to play through it nice and slow and count it out. Again, look at the sheet music notation, not the tabs. You can check yourself with the tabs when you're done. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. and 2 and 3 and 4. Alright, I'm going to talk through the first measure note by note with you for check yes or no, and then you've got all the tools you need to go in and figure out how to play the rest of this using the sheet music notation. Again, no using the tabs until the very end to check your work. So let's look at the first measure. We should talk through this anyway because it's called a pickup measure. When the first measure of music that you have to learn isn't filled with music, we call that a pickup measure. So as you can see here, the first measure only has 2 eighth notes. We're in 4/4 time, so we know an eighth note gets half a beat. If you add that up, that's 1 whole beat. So if there's 4 beats in a measure, and we're only playing for that last beat, the first 3 beats, we don't play anything. So we'd count that out first, and then the first note we see is on that bottom ledger line with the bottom staff line with that staff line running through it. So we know that that's an E. The second note is the second staff line with the staff line running through it. We know that's a G. The first note of the next measure over the word love is the same note. It's a G, but it looks different because it's a half note, and we're going to give that one 2 beats. So far we have 1 and 2 and 3 and do you love. If we count that out, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. So when we get to me, like I just did, we can see that it's in the second space, right? So it's in the space between the second and the third staff line, and we know that that's an A. And then the next do you is the same as the first do you. It's this first staff line, which is an E, and it's the second staff line, which is a G, and it's the same eighth note pattern too. So let's play the first 2 measures one more time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that's the first 2 measures. So like I said, you're fully equipped to go through this melody from check yes or no. If you want to, you can write in with a pencil or a pen the names of the notes after you figure out which one it is, and then make sure you're paying close attention to if it's an eighth note, quarter note, half note, or whole note. When you're ready, I'm going to play through it while I'm counting it out nice and slow, and you can play it along with me. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 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 2 and 3 and 4.